So my name is Margaret Brown, and I would like to introduce Estefania. Sorry, I keep pronouncing your name wrong as the introduction person, to come and speak with us today.
Perfect. I turned it off, so you turned it on. Hello, friends. Firstly, I want to thank all of you for joining us today and for your commitment to events like this that get women elected in politics. I also want to take a moment to recognize the incredible volunteers that it takes to put an event like this together. I also want to just acknowledge the collaborative and thank the people that it took for the collaborative effort of researching and writing this speech and the stories that I'm about to tell you. But before I begin, I would like to recognize that we are gathered on Treaty 6 territory. We, as a society, should be continuously reminded about how we are, or ought to be, working towards a reconciliation as a society. Today, I am humbled to be with all of you to speak about the importance of diverse voices in leadership positions. Today, I will highlight the story of 5 resilient females in Alberta's history and present, whose voices and actions are leaving or have left a path from which more progress can flourish. I believe that we must fight to have representation in our political spheres that is reflective of the vast spectrum of backgrounds of Albertans. It is my intention today to elevate the stories of females of color, that have a disability, immigrants or refugees, that are gender or sexually diverse. And it is my hope that by the end of today, you will reaffirm your commitment to supporting diverse women in politics. Some may think that leadership is solely defined by the top executives of a company, organization, or government, but in truth, leaders are those that harness the passions of skills to contribute to that society. Leaders are volunteers who keep the spirit of the team going when everyone is tired. The people that know the value of investing time and care into their families. People who challenge the discrimination we experience in our daily lives. We don't need to look far to know that we all take on leadership roles in our lives. And to exercise this point, I would like to draw your attention to some Albertan females that have carved their own definition of leadership. They have faced trials and tribulations, that they have had their talents and skills overlooked, but they persisted. They knew that their voice, their truth, and their message were and remain today one of the great values to this province and this country. And I am sure that they faced times of self-doubt, despair, and hopelessness. That they felt the weight of misogynistic realities, where the world of power, social structures, gender expectations are norms all embedded in the belief that females should act as societal prescriptions dictate. Alongside the expectation of femalehood, there are many cruxes of oppression and privilege at play in each of our lives. One's ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, class, ability, social economic status, all dictate the natural opportunities or barriers you will experience. How your ethnicity is correlated to your place, global and local power structures. How your age supposedly informs others of how capable you are, or how your disability will impede your opportunities to grow. But today I stand here with all of you, proud to be part of a government that not only acknowledges these embedded discriminatory systems, but it is actively seeking out mechanisms to even the playing field, address the barriers, and make Alberta a home where all persons can prosper. The Albertan females that I'm about to highlight today have been trailblazers, and they are a reminder to each of us that leadership is found in many forms. The first female that I would like to draw to your attention is Thelma Califo, a Métis female and respected elder. When others speak about Thelma's personality and spirit, they explain that she's always cared for others from a very young age. She is strong, independent, and dedicated not only to supporting her community, but to creating the needed new supports for many different kinds of communities. Thelma Califo was the first Métis female appointed to the Canadian Senate, and she has a remarkable story. Her success was dependent on her resiliency to overcome the complex balance of being a mother, leaving an abusive marriage, breaking the mold, and pursuing post-secondary education while supporting 7 little ones. Thelma did this in Lethbridge Community College. She persisted in caring not only for a better future for herself, but for others in her community. As an active member in the Métis Nation and worked on initiatives dedicated to housing, education, domestic violence prevention, and alcoholism supports. Passions for helping others and addressing social issues brought her all over Alberta. She dedicated her life to social activism, advocating predominantly for her Métis community, whom she calls the truly forgotten people. Thelma's tireless spirit and resiliency continued to motivate her advocacy. Her work did not go unnoticed, and in 1997, she was appointed to the Canadian Senate, making her the first Métis female to hold this position. This was a historical breakthrough, and that continues to inspire the lives of Canadian females, Indigenous and otherwise. Her story permeates into my heart as I know that our Indigenous communities continue to face real barriers and discrimination. I have seen how the legislative process is strengthened by having voices at the table that authentically understand the complexities of thriving as a Métis person that has faced countless barriers. Next, I would like to draw your attention to 2 females from Calgary that are acclaimed musicians and strong advocates for the LGBTQ+ rights. Tegan and Sarah. Tegan and Sarah are songwriters, multi-instrumentalists, and today are well-known Canadian pop stars. These 2 have been openly gay since their teens and have created a visible LGBTQ presence in the music scene. They have dealt with sexism, homophobia in the indie and mainstream audiences, whether that be through sexist comments or homophobic threats. However, these 2 females have stayed true to who they are. They have lived to know how challenging it is to love in a world that remains heteronormative, so now they use their fame to help others. For example, their presence in music itself speaks to the lived realities of homosexual people. In addition to their musical activism, they have started a foundation to support and fund LGBTQ organizations in Canada and more recently in the United States, after organizations lost their funding under the Trump administration. In June 2014, Tegan and Sarah joined the World Pride to perform in closing ceremonies to be voices of hope to people worldwide who face daily threats and harassment based off their sexual orientation and gender identity. Much like their music, their approach to activism is creative. This is evident in a t-shirt that was made to help raise funds for Rebel and Riot, a group supporting LGBTQ rights. The animals of a t-shirt features Tegan and Sarah, a turtle, a fox, a koala, a penguin, a dragonfly. Where am I going with this? They all had their Latin names put in there, and the bottom of the text reads, "Gay behavior is found in over 1,500 species. LGBTQ equality now." It is clear that these 2 might not make political records, but they certainly want to leave a political record off stage. As a genderqueer and gay person, I have first-hand experience in this discrimination still faced by the LGBTQ community, and as such, I draw on inspiration from role models like Tegan and Sarah, both on and off the stage, to addressing sexual orientation and gender expression discrimination. I'm one of the first openly gay queer MLAs in Alberta's legislature, and as such, I recognize the importance of our work in protecting gay-straight alliances in schools, in changing the Alberta Human Rights Code, in supporting LGBTQ organizations to continue their advocacy. Tegan and Sarah. I did count them as two different people, so when you're counting 5, so to highlight another remarkable Alberta female, I would like to share the life's work of Leilani Muir. Her passion was to protect people's right to choice and autonomy. In 1996, Leilani became the first eugenic survivor to file and win a lawsuit for wrongful sterilization against the Alberta government. I am sad to say that she passed away last year, and when reflecting on her life, she received a standing ovation in the legislature. I'm gonna need some water. Thank you. At the age of 10, Leilani was dropped off at the Provincial Training School for Mental Defectives in Red Deer. The name speaks for itself towards the horrors that she endured. Leilani was labeled moron, spent the rest of her childhood in Red Deer. Following a life of abuse and segregation, she left Red Deer and began her journey as an independent adult, eventually marrying. It was only then that she discovered that she had been sterilized without her knowledge or permission. Under the guise of an appendectomy, the doctors had, in fact, removed her fallopian tubes. Under the Alberta eugenics legislation, which was in force from 1928 to 1972, 2,800 Albertans were sterilized without their consent in an effort to weed out feeble-mindedness, the foundations of the eugenics movements, the movement and law. Leilani was a reluctant hero. Her true goal was simply to live a normal life. But life had other plans for her. She became the first eugenics survivor to file and win the lawsuit against the Alberta government, and following her lead, 800 others soon followed suit. After she won, though, then Premier Ralph Klein introduced a bill to override the rights of Albertans forcibly sterilized to prevent any further suits under the previous eugenics law. Thankfully, Pam Barrett, NDP MLA and leader, called on and created enough public pressure on the Klein government to withdraw this repugnant law. Leilani O'Malley Muir spent the remainder of her life sharing her really powerful story, shedding lights on eugenics and the necessity of inclusion of all persons with disabilities. In all facets of community, Leilani has become a champion for human rights, continued her advocacy and sharing until she passed away in 2016. She was the subject of the National Film Board of Canada documentary entitled The Sterilization of Leilani Muir. She participated in vagina monologues and even ran in a seat for the Legislative Assembly under the NDP banner. Leilani was a female who changed the landscape and realities of females with disabilities in Alberta and Canada. She championed human rights and inclusion and is indeed a great Albertan who will long be remembered and celebrated. And today, I am so grateful for her bravery to stand up against systems that have abused, assaulted her bodily autonomy. These stories share with them the difficult realities that are embedded into our society. These challenges are continuously magnified by characteristics of our identities that we do not choose. And so I believe it is critical to support the diverse voices of those that passions drive them to occupy spaces of leadership. Being a person of color and an immigrant, I learned early on that there are perpetuated characteristics that apply to me because of those attributes. I have watched my parents struggle with language to make life here in order for their children to have opportunities that they did not have. My story and the story of many other immigrants and refugees show the power and benefits in embracing ethnic diversity. To look at the power of immigration, I will share the drive of business entrepreneur Zahara Allah Harazi. Zara was born in Uganda. Her and her family were forced to leave as refugees. With just $7 hidden in her father's shoes, they landed in Yemen. Zahara was married at 17 after surviving Yemen's civil war. She immigrated to Canada in 1996. She was the mother of 3 children and did not have any formal education to help her navigate a newly adopted country. After arriving to Canada, Zara went to the Alberta College of Art and Design. 3 short years later, she became the founder and creative director of the hotspot shop, Foundry Communications. Zara also provided her pro bono work to a number of Canadian non-for-profit organizations. She's currently a consultant for the Royal Bank of Canada, helping shape their corporate and citizen youth and strategy, and delivering immediate high-impact results through RBC Career Launch Program. She also wears the hat of UNICEF Canada Ambassador, uses her voice to advocate for females and children in conflict. She often comments in her speeches that balancing the raising of her children with her need to put food on the table was extremely challenging, saying that females tend to be hard on themselves for not being able to do it all. She suggests that being aware of the negative and positive self-talks is extremely important in one's wellness and capacity to be resilient. Her advice to inspiring entrepreneurs is to celebrate your individuality in business and in life. It is a competitive advantage like no other. I think we can take that into the political sphere as well. It's a powerful message to counter the internalization of the expectations that do not serve us. It is said that our internal dialogue will exceed by 100-fold the amount you speak with any other human being. So I encourage all of you here today, when you're leaving this lunch, heading back into the world, to be mindful about the message you're telling yourself. So I specifically have highlighted the stories of 5 females that started or intermixed at some point with our regional community of Alberta. I believe that the opportunity that I have to stand in front of you today as an MLA is the manifestation of advocacy and rights fought for by all walks of life that came before me. I want to take a moment to thank the collaborative effort that it took to put all these stories together, and I would like to take a moment to also share mine. I live in an intersection too complicated to be controlled by a 4-way stop sign. I think of it more like a traffic jam. At 26, life has challenged me to commit to something bigger than myself. I am an immigrant, I am genderqueer, I am Catholic raised, I'm a survivor of abuse, and I have a learning disability. And those all things taught me compassion. Well, my friends, these things that shape my identity and my experience, I'm committed to making life better for Albertans, and it's rooted in an understanding of the barriers interwoven into the structures of power. I am proud to represent not only my constituents in the legislature, but a number of underrepresented groups as well. When elected, I was part of many firsts in Alberta's legislative history. I was the first of 3 Latin American as a Colombian Canadian. I was the first of 3 LGBTQ, openly LGBTQ. I'm actually the youngest female in our caucus. I'm also the youngest government whip in Alberta's history. And I know that my existence in this space is new, and I know that by being here, that I leave the door open for those to come after me. It was a path that, in my view, has been carved before me. And I understand that I have a passion to fight for society that is fair and that understands that we create the cycles of poverty and that we can change the playing field that perpetuates this thought with thoughtful policy. A fair minimum wage, a child benefit tax, school nutrition programs, cutting school fees, $25 a day childcare, early learning sites, GSA, strengthening the human rights codes to include gender and identity and expression, committing to the supporting of infrastructure that provides clean drinking water for our Indigenous people, supporting frontline workers in health and education, ending the obnoxiously misguided 2-year limitation on reporting of sexual assault, limitations on ending the warrant system for outstanding tickets and fines, updating employment standards and labor laws, and there is more, but we will not stop there. Have you ever heard of the term overrepresented? Marginalized voices have been just that in all the wrong places for too long. These policies can help make a recipe that fits for resiliency. I believe that what our government is doing is something that can change what the next generation experiences. Just to tell you a little bit more, I wasn't always an Albertan. I was born in Colombia. I came to Canada when I was in 1997 when I was 6 years old. My mother, which is here today, and I very much wouldn't be here without her, very literally. But my spirit would also not be what it is without her. She and my parents, okay, don't, I'm not gonna make eye contact during this. I know, like many other immigrants, my parents have sacrificed a great deal of their own personal freedom. I can feel you crying over there. I know that my parents sacrificed a great deal in order to be here. We come from a country that is beautiful. It has biodiversity that would impress you to no end. It has a story and a culture and a people that are caring and kind and creative. It has a history told by many Western cultures that is dangerous, that it's corrupt, and it has a history with drug trafficking, and largely most of Western culture only know of that. So I'm going to give you a new fact. When you meet a Colombian, there's over 178 fruits in Colombia, more than any of the other places in the world. I hope that the people leaving here will never ask them what it's like being from a cocaine country. Can ask them about the fruit. There's things that you've never heard of, you've never tried, but you should, and it's delicious. But I know that I came here from a family that, and we were talking about this yesterday, that it wasn't just my mom's sacrifices, that it's a group of women and visionaries and dreamers that have said to themselves this circumstance will not define me. My grandmother was an orphan. She in a lot of ways has also been an inspiration in my life. She decided very early on that she was going to change her circumstances and make sure that her daughters had opportunities that she did not have. And she used the skills that were available to her. And in that case, it was fashion design. And actually, I sew as well, and I learned to sew out of respect to her memory. But I know that what they did and what both of my mom's parents did in order for her to be where she was able to get education as a speech pathologist and audiologist in Colombia, and she was able to be a successful business person in our country, and we had a very good life in Colombia, but my parents had dreams bigger than my own. Both my father and my mother are idealists and dreamers, and my father always working with communities, engaging in folks and in finding ways and solutions to find creative solutions to problems. I'll tell you a little story from the town I was born in. I was born in a town called Rihuacha, and it actually didn't have running water when we moved there. This is not a circumstance that happens in all of Colombia. No, we have water. But this was an effect of a corrupt political system that wasn't working for the people, and one that has developed a respect that I have with our democratic process. There was no running water there, not because of lack of money. There was not even no water there because of a lack of infrastructure. It was a lack of accountability to people and a lack of knowledge and education for the people that they have power. There's a learned sense of apatheticness within the culture because of the failures that they have experienced. And my folks came in there and they kind of looked around and they said, "What do you mean there's no running water? That doesn't make any sense. This is a place that has resources, it has jobs. Why is it that buckets are still being used in a shower?" And so they gathered the community, and by the end of it, they did have running water at the end. And again, it wasn't about getting money into place. It was just about teaching people their power in making change. And those were the same parents that one day saw an immigration poster to Canada. And my dad brought it home. He was an air traffic controller and a history professor at the time. He brought it home to my mom, and she said, "Okay, I think that they wanted something bigger than us. We were going to be okay in Colombia, but at the end of the day, job and opportunities and security was something that we would always be fighting for." And so they took their 2 kids at the time, and they brought us here, and taught us that these are things that we weren't necessarily meant to have. And we were grateful for each step of the way. Myself and my brother are quite different people, both very intelligent, but my brother is extremely intelligent. He's a genius in his own right. And from a young age, I struggled learning English. I struggled getting acquainted. I'm a people person. I knew what it was like in Colombia. I did not know what it was like here. And when I struggled learning English, I would turn to my mom and explain, "I don't know how he can do it so quickly and I can't." And she looked at me and said, "There's sometimes that the things that you are going through is bigger than yourself. It's not your own internal failure, but it's something bigger going on." And she was right. What it was is more of a cultural shock and a need to get adjusted to that. But it was those kinds of words of wisdom that taught me to believe that the barriers that we experience are not necessarily because of us. It's something bigger than ourselves, and to see it in that respect allowed me to create a sense of self-esteem that has guided me through any barrier that I've experienced.
Beautiful.
So they came to Canada Canada, and they were part of the Spanish-speaking community, and I had countless stories where I used to sit under the kitchen table and play with Legos. And for all of you that might know me, I might always look like I'm not listening, but I can hear everything. And you know, she was probably one of the few people that always realized that I heard everything. And so I would sit underneath the kitchen table and play with my Legos, but in that, we had like a steady stream of immigrant families that would come to us as they were looking for employment. They were settling, they didn't have families here, and they would tell their stories, from refugees to immigrants, about the difficulty in settling here. And I think through all of that, the thing that I really learned is that it almost takes liaisoning between communities, being able to speak not the physical language of Canadian culture, but understanding the structures at play, and then translating that to what people come from, and being able to translate those things so it's a functional relationship. And I think that's the difficult part when you're faced with both language barriers, norm barriers, and just adapting, and just trying to do the basic things like feeding your family. And so they took me everywhere with them, and volunteered me, and told me to a lot of things. And one of the very first things one of the very big things that I did as a youth, I was 15 years old, and I started a youth group for Colombian immigrants, because at the time the statistics were showing that they were most at risk for joining gangs. This is not something I wanted to do. I wasn't particularly looking for it, but I'm very grateful that it happened, because usually when opportunities present themselves to me, I have a hard time saying no. And I was taught that this is part of what we can offer, you know. So I learned very young to translate what was being done in the community, and to bring people out, and to build resiliency within the community so they can empower themselves. I continued. My mom is a speech pathologist. I worked with her with kids with disabilities from a very young age, whether it was during tech support or developmental resources, but she also taught me behavioral strategies in return. And those things are skills that I've carried through me for all my life, including combating my own learning disability. I struggled for a very long time to read. And it was actually the fact that I learned to use computers and program, and the words of wisdom that she always gave me to kind of find out what it is that you need to do to accommodate things for how you work. So that's what I did when I was in grade 7. I learned to find a way for me to be able to read, and it took technology, and it took all of these things. But when I did, I couldn't stop reading. So I continued on, knowing that all of the work that my family has done from the very beginning. They started the very first Colombian Independence Day. It brought people from all over, Vancouver, everywhere, to celebrate something here that they don't get to see a lot of the culture. And we continued on. When I started my work with the multicultural health brokers and community fundraising, it was the first time that they had ever received any money to be able to put on a community service and an activity for a broader community. I was able to write a grant and be able to get some money so they could do this. And my dad looked at me and he's like, that's the very first time that we haven't had to pay for that. And it was always fascinating to me that I can just support the initiatives of other people, and I don't need to always come up with things myself, but I need to know how to listen. And so continued on. I went into university, into education. I did some work in theater production. And in all of those things, regardless of where I was, I would end up advocating, whether it was for mental health, for equal circumstances. And eventually I did it enough times that I said to myself, if I'm going to do this and if I'm going to continue doing this, I'm going to find a way to do this right. So I went into social work. And in social work, I did my practicum in Rachel Notley's constituency office. See where this is going. It brought all of the things that I've loved, because I hadn't really been politically active my life. You come from a country whose politics are corrupt. It doesn't teach you to engage. It doesn't teach you to understand what being represented looks like. So when I went into that office and I met the people that work there and the representation and the work that happens, it brought all of the things that I've done all my life all together. I would have to say that I was probably a very successful practicum, because by the end of it, I was elected. But I was elected because I couldn't stop working. I was taking 5 courses, I was working 2 days a week, I was working outside of that as well to maintain myself, and I was volunteering in the number of things that one does when one is obsessed with doing these things. And so there wasn't a sense of balance in my life, but there was a sense of direction, and I very much believe that sometimes self-care also means understanding what it is that you're willing to sacrifice and what it is that you're willing to do to recharge. And doing this work recharges me. And I know that when I saw a leader that really represented the values of regular Albertans, and I saw a leader that didn't step away from her feminine qualities and still had the respect from people and understanding that she's very intelligent and articulate, but she's also emotional and caring. And it was one of the first few leaders in the political sphere that I've seen balance that as well as she does. And that was the inspiration and the thing that brought me in. So I started volunteering for the election planning committee. I remember going through the first few meetings and just looking around and not being sure what was happening. But I learned quickly. And I pick things up, and you give me something to do and I'll just carry it. And in one of the meetings, we were in the midst of figuring out who's going to run in the different areas. And the premier looks at me and she says, "You should run." She's not an easy person to say no to, but I said no. I countered that with, I will look for someone to run. But then I went back and I talked to some friends of mine that were part of the political sphere. They allowed me the leniency of basically just answering all of my questions for I think it was 2 hours. I just ran scenarios with them, questions about the work, about what it entails, about what happens in certain situations. And eventually I said to myself, this is a country that has given me a lot, but one that I know that I can contribute to, and I would love to do that. I grew up in Sherwood Park, and that's the area that I wanted to represent. That is the place that I've called home in Alberta for many years. And I think there's something to be said about the space I occupy just by being myself in Sherwood Park. When I walk in, I remember the very first speech that I gave, and someone looked at me and said, "Wow, our government really does look different." And it's true. That was one of the reasons that I decided to run. I knew that those voices that I've heard and I know and I respect very much weren't being represented. and that we're never going to break the cycle unless we do get these voices, which is why I chose today to highlight the voices of diverse women from different backgrounds, from different stories, with different emphasis, because I believe it takes us looking around and saying, how can we support women that are unlikely to occupy this space? I was a student. I haven't finished any of my degrees. I want to, but things keep coming up. But I think we have to look beyond that to understand, and this is something that I remember hearing from the premier was, you know, when I was feeling like I didn't know enough. She had said, are you willing to ask questions and learn? And I think that's a lot of things that politicians haven't done. They've come in with ideas and presence, and I think it takes something of listening and being able to commit to finding a solution and to hearing people out and sometimes finding the information for yourself to make a decision. And that's what a representative democracy does. And so with that, I want to kind of explain that I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful that each and every one of you have decided to come support this caucus, because the work that is being done here will support people like me. And if you want your government to represent voices and to make change that you're already seeing, I read out a list, and I read it quickly because it was a lot to get through. And those were just 2 years. Those things aren't complete. The child care program can't be completed unless we find ways to find the solutions needed. And we need people at the table that are committed to doing that, to complete this work. So if you want to see those kinds of represented, elected officials, we need the support. There's very real barriers to being a female in politics, whether it's harassment, whether it's all of these things, but you intermix that with any form, and that was my point today, to tell you if you have a disability, if you're a person of color, if you're a person from gender and sexual diverse person, you're going to experience something different, and you need other supports, whether it's time, whether it's volunteers, whether it's money. You are going to have to struggle through it because you don't have the natural networks that have been created in politics because of who was there before. Those natural networks don't exist. What it takes is commitment, it takes a vision, and we already have it. Those things are here. So the things that can come after are much better, and I think that's what you're committing to when you donate here. And so with that, I would like to conclude my speech, but I very much appreciate all of your attention.